Hey everybody, how's everyone doing today? It's a beautiful Friday, the sun is shining, hopefully people are getting the chance to get outside and enjoy some of this sunshine, but of course keeping your social distance. I'm a little bit thrown off today. This is a new format for Facebook Live, and it's not really telling me if I can't see if anybody's viewing. Oh, people are viewing. Okay. I can see it on my phone too. Woo! So how is everybody doing? I said yesterday we're into week 5 of the pandemic. That in some ways sounds impossible, but it is. From the time the World Health Organization started to use that word pandemic, and then everything's at first slowly, but then very quickly started to shut down. It's been 5 weeks, and so it's again that point of all of this where I think people are really starting to feel the social isolation and the impact of not being around people. And I noticed one of my friends, Kathy Stock, I don't think she'll mind me saying this, posted something on Facebook today where she was feeling really tired and exhausted and finding it hard to be motivated to do anything. And she used the word, we're all weary. We're all just tired. I know the first few weeks of this, I was finding it really hard to concentrate. Like I would sit down to try and do something like write a sermon, and I couldn't concentrate because there was just so much going on in my head and going on in the world around me that I couldn't concentrate. And it's getting a little bit better now as I'm getting into the rhythm, the new rhythm of what all this means to us. But I know it's a really tough time for people. If you're feeling tired, if you're feeling wore out, if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling down, that's all okay. It's completely normal to be feeling all of those things or some of those things. And I always say, be gentle with yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. If you haven't taken on or completed that grand project that everybody keeps saying this is your chance to do it, don't worry about it. Don't be putting too much pressure on yourself. Just be right now. Just survive. Just get through this. Reach out to people if you need help. Pick up the phone and phone someone. If you know someone who needs some help, please take the time to phone someone, a phone call, a FaceTime, whatever technology you can use would be much appreciated, because we all need each other right now. And we use the phrase social distancing, but really the physical distancing is the better way to describe it, because we can still be connected socially without being close to each other physically. So I would encourage everybody to keep up with your social connections. Just do it in a different kind of way. I want to say a word about my tea today. I brought it down in my thermos. I'm at the office and I brought this down from home. This is Mother's Little Helper from David's Tea. It helps when you drink this. You have to sing the Rolling Stones song, running for the shelter of her mother's little helper. But this is not that kind of Mother's Little Helper. This is a herbal tea that helps you relax. So I'm pretty chill right now. Good stuff. Minty, citrusy. So good. So what I wanted to do today is give a couple updates on some stuff, and then I wanted to take a few minutes at the end to say a few words about the gospel reading this week, which is the story of Jesus. Really, I guess it's Thomas encountering Jesus, the risen Jesus. So I just wanted to say a few words about that. So I wanted to start off, and then when I'm doing that, I would like for people to share their comments. I see some people making comments there now saying hi. Feel free to do that. Say hi to people. You can share something serious, or you can be silly, what kind of things you're doing to keep your sanity during the pandemic lockdown. So you feel free to do that. So the first thing I wanted to give an update on is the Family Food Initiative. So that's a project, as most of you have known. We started very early on when the pandemic struck, when schools started to shut down. St. Mark's, East Point Elementary, McDonald Drive Elementary, and then some other concerned citizens from the neighborhood got together to come up with a plan to raise some money to help ensure that families who were already struggling before this hit, to ensure that they had some help, the help that they needed in order to get by and get the basic supplies that they needed in terms of groceries. So when we started, very quickly, people responded very generously. And so to date, we've raised over $13,000, which is completely amazing. And to date, because I think yesterday another batch of gift cards went out, so to date, we have given out over $6,000 in grocery gift cards to families in not only just in the Virginia Park neighborhood, but also kind of in like the East End neighborhood. So $6,000 that's out there in the community because of the kindness and generosity of St. Mark's and of people in the community that wanted to support St. Mark's in this initiative. So that's an amazing thing, and it's making a big difference to people. You know, this is a scary pandemic, and yes, people have been very sick, and some people here in the province have died, and across Canada have died, and that's devastating. A close friend of mine just lost his dad this week, and so that really, to me, put a face on it. But I still think the biggest consequence to our society over all of this pandemic is the economic impact. Our economy was already the most vulnerable were already suffering in our economy. Our economy is geared really around the haves and not the have-nots. And so there was already a discrepancy. There was a wide gap between the rich and the poor before any of this happened. And I think what this pandemic is really doing is laying bare even more the discrepancy between the rich and the poor. And so the most vulnerable among us are the ones who are going to be the most deeply impacted by this. And our economy is going to take a big hit, and people are going to be suffering for a long time from this. And so there's a real role for the church and other community organizations to come together and to help people through this difficult time, because I think it's going to take quite a long time for us to get back. And I've stopped saying get back to normal, because I don't know if there is a normal, and I don't know if I want to go back to normal, because in terms of the economy and some other things like the environment and those kinds of things, normal just wasn't working. And so I'm hoping that all of this, the pandemic, COVID-19, the economic shutdown, will change the way we view our economy, the way we view the environment, the way that we view people who are, part of our economy. I keep thinking about these essential workers making minimum wage in grocery stores. Like, come on, like we're better than that. These people deserve a living wage. And so I'm hoping that one of the things that will come out of this is that we will get our act together and really take care and support of each other. So the Family Food Initiative is going great, and I thank everybody again for their continued support. If you'd like to donate to that and you haven't done that yet, you can go to our website and give that way, or you can contact the office either through the email or the phone to give. The other announcement I wanted to kind of give us is, maybe some of you have already read the email, but we're not going to be doing a service on Sunday. We decided we're going to take a break. We did 4 services that way, plus the extra Good Friday, Monday, Thursday. I always like to take a break this time of the year anyways, after Easter, because it's kind of busy leading up to Holy Week and to Easter. It was no different this year. Even though we weren't gathering here for services, there was still a lot of prep work going on behind the scenes. And so I kept saying last week that things felt normal but different. I'm still doing all preparatory work, but there was nobody around to share in it, just a few people who were here in person to take part in it. So I I took a couple of days off, but I feel like I need a weekend off too. So we're going to pause, and I know Kevin deserves a break. Kevin McGraw has been absolutely fantastic throughout this. So kind and so generous to give of his time and to let us use his equipment to do our services the way that we've been doing. And we've got so much positive feedback from people, how much they appreciate the services, and not only that, but the quality. Kevin has really taken us to a whole new level than we would have been able to do on our own. And I know it's not all about quality, but it really helps when you have someone who knows what they're doing. So we decided, looking ahead at the next few weeks and what was going to be coming up, we decided this was a good week to take a little break, to push pause. And so we're directing people elsewhere. There's lots of stuff online now on Facebook and other places where you can avail of some Sunday morning services. You can go to the Diocese of Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador Facebook page, and you'll find all kinds of stuff there. Some really cool stuff going on here in the city. But you're not even limited by your own diocese now. You can go wherever you want to worship. So I would encourage you to do that. If you're looking for something specific, you can reach out to me, and maybe I could direct you where you could go. So I have an announcement, and this is a big announcement. I'm very excited about this. So NTV has reached out to us to broadcast some of our services. And I think this is because of Kevin McGraw and his involvement and the quality of what we've been putting out. NTV has reached out to us to broadcast, for now, at least 2 of our services. There will be 3 other parishes from 3 other denominations that will be involved. And so we will record the service for the date that we're scheduled, submit it to them, and then it will be on NTV on Sunday. I'm not exactly sure of the time yet of when we would be on, but when I find that out, I'll let you know. So it's St. Mark's Bethesda Pentecostal Church, which is our neighbors just over here, St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church in Mount Pearl, and also the Salvation Army Church in Conception Bay South. Those are the 4 churches that are going to be participating. Our first Sunday is going to be May the 10th, which is Mother's Day. So we will be on NTV. So I gotta say, 12-year-old me is freaking out right now because I'm going to get to preach on NTV. So I'm over the moon just thinking about this, but also kind of nervous because now I gotta do a sermon on NTV. So that's fantastic news for us. We're so excited because it helps us broaden our reach a little bit, because one of our concerns from the beginning is that not everybody is technologically savvy enough or online or has access to the internet to be able to view our services and feel connected that way. So we're really glad, so for a couple of weeks anyways, that people will be able to tune in to NTV to see what we're doing. So that's excellent. We're so excited about that. And as I get more of the details come in, I will be sure to pass them along to everyone. Take a sip of my mother's little helper. So the other thing I just wanted to say a couple of words about, this was in our email, and it's also been on our Facebook page, but the Beer and Conversation that's coming up on Tuesday evening. Since the pandemic hit, our Beer and Hymns crew, we call ourselves, have been trying to figure out how we could take Beer and Hymns online, go digital. And music is really tricky online because unless you have someone who can kind of be in one place and play either keyboards or a guitar and sing, it's really challenging because oftentimes there's a delay, and then if you're all singing together online on something like Zoom, it gets really noisy, and then some people don't have a good internet connection and it gets really glitchy. So we couldn't really come up with a good format to be able to do what we wanted to do. So what we decided to do instead is to just gather for a conversation. So a Tuesday evening at 7, we're going to gather. It'll be myself, Ashley Ruby, Miriam Bowlby from Cochrane Street United, and then a few other people. Some of them you would know, some of you wouldn't know. Rick Hibbs from St. Mark's is going to be joining us. Daniel Newman is also going to be joining us, and Carly Windsor, who's one of our vocalists at Beer and Hymns. And so we're going to be talking about where is God in the pandemic. And you may have seen some things being shared, articles, news stories, blog posts, that kind of thing on Facebook or Twitter throughout the pandemic. And anytime there's a crisis, this kind of comes to the fore again, this question, where is God in the pandemic? And so there's some rich theological ground to mine there. So the format will be, so the people on the panel will gather via Zoom, and then we will stream to Facebook Live. So we'll all be on your screen, and we will kind of chat a little bit about the question, but it will also be open to people to make comments, ask questions, the same way that you can do here in this format, what we're doing right now. So mark your calendars, Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. It will be streamed through the Beer and Hymns Facebook page, but I'm going to make sure to share it to our page as well, so you can come to our page to watch it. Or if you've already liked the Beer and Hymns St. John's Facebook page, you can go directly there and watch it from there. So it should be a good evening, a nice diverse group of people, and we're really being intentional about not having the panel stacked with experts or professionals, i.e. clergy. So stuff keeps popping up here. We want like lay people and some clergy and people who are really involved in the church, people maybe who are on the outskirts of church. So there's a lot of it's a good variety, young, old, so a good cross section of people who are thinking about these kinds of questions. The other thing, and I didn't bring it out with me, but I should have, is the book study. We're going to be starting in May, and again, that's gone out on our parish email, but it's also on our Facebook page. We're going to be doing a study of the Rachel Held Evans book, Inspired. And so it's a book about the Bible and how we read the Bible and what is the Bible and what does it mean today. So it should be a really interesting study. I just finished reading the book a couple of weeks ago, and it's really good. Rachel Held Evans, if you've ever heard of her and her writings, she's a very engaging writer and deals with some complex issues in a very easily accessible kind of way. She comes from an evangelical background, but she's now part of the Episcopal Church. Actually, I should say, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, I think it was in late 2018, Rachel passed away. She was taken with a sudden illness and died, and left behind a husband and a young child, which was very tragic. Big, huge loss for the church, the wider church. And so, but she's a great writer and has left behind some great work for people to read. And Inspired was the last book that she put out before she passed away. So the format for that is Zoom, but it's not going to be the plan. The original plan was to do the book study on Zoom. So people would register, I'd send out an invite, we would gather through Zoom, which is a video conferencing app, and I kind of was figuring, like normally when I do a book study here at St. Mark's, I can get anywhere from 12 to 15, maybe 20 sometimes, people who want to take part, and I thought those numbers would transfer over to online, and so I was thinking, if I get a dozen or 15 people, I'd be super happy. And it's a small enough group that you can have some conversations on Zoom and still not be talking over each other, and people wouldn't feel left out. So that went out yesterday in the email and was up on Facebook yesterday. I've already got 8 people for sure who have registered by sending me an email, but there's also a number of people either on my personal page for Facebook page or the parish event Facebook page that have expressed interest. So it's more people than I expected. So I would encourage you, if you want to take part in this, send me an email as soon as possible, because I may have to cap how many people are in the group if I want to keep it on Zoom. If I get an influx of people who want to do it, we may have to change the way we offer the book study. We may have to go with Facebook Live or something where people can just, it'll be more of a public kind of thing. So pros and cons to both of those things, but if you're serious about the book study, please send me an email, rcook with an E at stmarksanglican.ca, and do that as soon as possible if you want to make sure that you're part of what we're doing. Okay, I'm just going to scroll down on my comments and stuff over here, see what's going on. I think it's just some people saying hi. Yeah, comments about NTV. Yeah, Susan's saying that Zoom has a 100 people limit. I know that, but that's fine if I'm just on there talking for an hour. But that's not the way I like to do a book study. I like to get a conversation going. And so I find with that many people, you can't have a conversation. Even 100 people in a room here, you can't really have a conversation. The format changes. So I'm going to have maybe some give and take. So if I limit Zoom to say 12 or 15 people, we'll have a better conversation, but not as many people will be able to take part. If I go to Facebook Live, more people will be able to take part, but the conversation gets a little bit harder because people are just typing in questions. So I have to weigh both those things and see how many people are really seriously interested. Because I find sometimes with Facebook events, it's easy to say you're interested, but that doesn't really mean that you're going to take part. So that's why I'm encouraging people to send me an email as soon as possible, so I know how many people really want to do this. And if we start to creep up, over 15 towards 20 people, we may have to change the way we're going to do it, because I want it to be the best experience for people. Then you got some people who are not really comfortable with Zoom, probably haven't used it before, but will be more comfortable with Facebook. Zoom would give you the kind of privacy to be able to open up a little bit more and just talk more openly, whereas Facebook gives you a bit of anonymity. You can kind of just be present and listen and take stuff in and not feel like you're so out there. So there's pros and cons to both. But what I would encourage is people to send me an email as soon as you can if you want to do this. And as I mentioned yesterday, that book, Inspired by Rachel Held Evans, is available on Amazon now through Kindle for $3.99. So it's a great chance. Even if you don't want to do the book study, it's a great opportunity to get a really good book for a great price if you just want to read it on your own. Derek Shepard, what are you saying to me? You look clean cut. Did Lori do that? If so, what does she charge? The beard could be tidied up a bit. No, this is all still pretty natural. This is all COVID-19 genuine, no haircut or nothing. I did, comb my hair. I apologize if the beard is a bit unkempt. I'm trying to keep that down as much as I can. Maybe I'll have to get some beard balm or something in there so that I'm up to Derek's standards. Susan, Zoom is more engaging for participants. We do our book club that way. There are 8 of us. Yeah, so 8 is a good number for Zoom. 8 works fine, but I'm not so sure that a big crowd would work on Zoom. Unless, again, if it's just me giving a presentation, it would work fine. But, I just don't think it's going to work. So what I wanted to do now, I talked for a long time that time, but I find there's, even though, we're not shut down, but things have changed so much. There's still so much going on and so much information that I feel like I need to give to you. So sometimes I worry that I'm boring people by coming at them with so much information. But I think one of the really important parts, one of the really important roles for me right now as parish priest is communication, to keep people in the loop, and just be present to people in whatever way that I can. So the last thing I wanted to take a few minutes, just a very few minutes. This is not going to be a sermon like I would do on Sunday. So if anybody who attends St. Mark's regularly and they think, oh my God, is he going to do a sermon? This is going to go on another 20 minutes. No, I'm not that. Thinking about Norm Matthews. Norm is my timekeeper when I'm preaching. He tells me afterwards if I was right on to 10 minutes, if I was 12 minutes, but it was a good sermon. And sometimes if I go 15 or more minutes, he's like, good sermon, but you got to watch that time. So it won't be anything like that. But what I did want to just spend a few minutes with, because we won't be doing a service on Sunday, and so I just wanted to share. Really, it's just one thought about the gospel reading on Sunday, and it's the gospel reading from the Gospel of John, where Thomas encounters the risen Christ. So I wanted to read a little bit of the gospel reading. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I really want to just focus in on one part of it. And so from the Gospel of John, and I'm reading from the Message translation. If you want a Bible that's easy to understand, now it's not a literal translation or anything like that. Sometimes the translator, Eugene Peterson, takes some big liberties with the text. But it's a good translation, good devotional translation. If you find you read things like the New Revised Standard Version, or if, God forbid, you're reading the King James Version, which is a great, poetics-wise, it's great, but for reading and for interpretation, I think it's terrible. But something like the Message is very contemporary, very easy to understand. And sometimes I find, too, in reading a piece of scripture from a different translation, it just opens it up, like new ways of seeing things. So what I wanted to do is just read a little bit of the gospel reading from Sunday, from the Message, and then just share something that really kind of stuck with me this week, even though I'm not preparing a sermon, that was on my mind. So the context for this is Jesus has appeared to the disciples in the upper room. Unfortunately, Thomas wasn't there. And so in this scene, this is where Jesus appears to Thomas as well. But Thomas, sometimes called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples told them, "We saw the Master." But he said, "Unless I see the nail holes in his hands, put my finger in the nail holes, and stick my hand in his side, I won't believe." 8 days later, his disciples were again in the room. This time, Thomas was with them. Jesus came through the locked doors, stood among them, and said, "Peace to you." Then he focused his attention on Thomas. "Take your finger and examine my hands. Take your hand and stick it in my side. Don't be unbelieving. Believe." Thomas said, "My Master, my God." Jesus said, "So you believe because you've seen with your own eyes. Even better blessings are in store for those who believe without seeing." Here endeth the lesson. So, and feel free to share your thoughts about that particular story. So one of the things that I love about the Gospels, and maybe this is true of all Scripture, but I know in particular when it comes to the Gospels, that no matter how often I come back to them, every time I see something different, or hear something different, or I experience something different. And oftentimes it has something or everything to do with the situation that I find myself in. Whether it's something personal that I'm going through, whether it's something that I'm going through as a priest here at St. Mark's, or that St. Mark's is going through, or whether it's something that we're going through as a people, as a society. And so when I read this passage this week, one of the things that really jumped out at me, because so often when we read this passage, I think we get caught up in the kind of the supernatural, appearance of Jesus. We get caught up in Thomas, and poor old Thomas gets a bad rap. He gets the moniker Doubting Thomas, and I don't think he deserves it. But we spend so much time focused on those other parts of the story that we take our eyes off of Jesus, and we miss something really important about his appearance to the disciples. Now, one of the things that happens not just in the Gospel of John, but in most of the resurrection appearances, minus the Gospel of Mark, because there's no resurrection appearance in the Gospel of Mark, but in Matthew, Luke, and John, there's this sense that when people encounter the risen Jesus, they don't recognize him, at least not at first. And it takes something to kind of trigger in their mind, like who this Jesus is. So in Luke, it's when he, lifts up the bread to break the bread. That's when the disciples recognize who he is. Earlier in John's Gospel, it's when he says Mary Magdalene's name. When he says Mary, she recognized this as Jesus. And so in this scene, there's something about Jesus, his appearance when he appears, that tells the disciples and Thomas in particular who Jesus is. So, and what really grabbed my attention this time, and I've read this story literally hundreds of times, was the fact that Jesus has wounds or scars, right? So he has wounds in his hands and in his side. So the wounds that he bore from the crucifixion, he still has them. Now, up until this point, when he encounters or is about to encounter Thomas, there's no mention of those scars. It's only when Thomas brings them up. So then when Jesus appears, he is bearing those scars, which is odd when you think about it, because he's just gone through, yes, the horrible death of crucifixion, but then he is resurrected. And all throughout the Gospel of John, which has a very high Christology, so there's a lot of focus on the divinity of Jesus. And Jesus has a lot of these really elaborate and long speeches where he talks about how he is with the Father and the Father is with him, and he and the Father are one, and a lot of talk about the glorification that the Father will give to him through his death and then in his resurrection. So with all that talk of glorification that would come with resurrection, it strikes me as odd that Jesus would carry those scars from that horrible death, and crucifixion wasn't just a violent death. It was a kind of death that was it was a shaming death. It literally marked you out of existence, right? It was teaching other people a lesson. Like if you don't fall in line with what the empire says, this is going to happen to you too. And, it will be not only painful and horrible, but literally you will cease to exist. You will be wiped from memory. So it's ironic, I find, that when Jesus appears to his disciples in that upper room, when he appears to Thomas in particular, he comes bearing those scars. Why? Why would Jesus continue to bear those scars? Why would Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, be still wounded and bear the marks of that horrible crucifixion? Why? The simplest answer that I can come up with is because we're all wounded. We all bear scars. So it makes sense that Jesus in his resurrection is still bearing the marks of humanity. He is still human. It's the resurrected Jesus is still the human Jesus. And so he shows us that even through the worst that this world that can throw at us, the worst that this world can wound us, the worst that this world can scar us, is no match for the resurrection. No match for the new life that comes through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Because yes, we are all wounded and scarred. Some of us bear those wounds in our bodies. Anyone who's given birth to a child, you bear the scars, the wounds, the marks of that ordeal, whether it be stretch marks or marks from a surgery or something. You bear those wounds, but those wounds remind you of not only what was lost, but what has been gained, the new life that has come through that ordeal. For some of us, it could be through some horrible surgeries, heart surgeries, or cancer treatments, and you bear the wounds and the scars of those that ordeal as a testimony to the faithfulness of God and a testimony to the new life that we experience through the resurrection. Some of us, the wounds are not physical. They're emotional. They're mental. They come from broken relationships. They come from anxiety. They come from depression. They come from bipolar disorder. All of these different things that life does to us. We bear those scars and we take them with us. But that's not the end of the story. That the story continues. But even in our woundedness, we still bear the new life that comes through the resurrection. And to me, there's something really beautiful about that. And that's, for me, that's how I make sense of the physicality of the resurrection. It's still, bodies still matter, right? So it's not that Jesus is some kind of disembodied kind of figure that is resurrected, but there's a physicality to it, because in us too, the resurrection is physical, right? It's here and now. It's in our flesh and blood. It's in our bones. It's in our hands and feet. It's in our presence, our physical presence in the world. And we can't do any of that stuff without carrying the wounds that we have that have been inflicted on us by the world. Some of them, yes, may be our own doing, our own wounds that we've inflicted on ourselves. But even those wounds don't limit us. They don't negate who we are. They don't separate us from God. That all of those wounds, God takes them and uses them for His glory, for the glory of what God is doing in the world. So that in my brokenness, in my woundedness, I am still able to be present and to love and to care for other wounded people. The famous writer Henry Nouwen has a wonderful book, if you ever get a chance to read it, The Wounded Healer, where he says, we are all wounded healers, right? It is in our woundedness and our brokenness that we are able to take care of each other, right? None of us are perfect. None of us have escaped life without some suffering or pain or loss. And that's okay, because that's what makes us human, and that's what makes us able to connect with other people and to be empathetic to other people. So don't be ashamed of your wounds. Don't hide away your wounds, because it is in those wounds and through those wounds that the risen Christ speaks and lives and is present in the world. So that's my little mini sermon on that gospel reading. So feel free to share your thoughts here about any of that stuff or anything that I've said. I've gone on a lot longer than I try to keep it to a half hour. I'll take a couple of sips of tea here if somebody wants to share something, some idea, some question or anything about anything I just said. In regards to the Thomas passage or the book study or the Family Food Initiative, Beer and Conversation. One thing I will say about Beer and Conversation, we're encouraging people that while you watch, you should have your favorite beer with you, right? If you're not a beer drinker, maybe a glass of wine or scotch or something would be fine. And if you're not a drinker at all, a nice cup of tea or something is totally acceptable. I always tell people when they balk a little bit when I talk about like pub theology and beer and hymns and that kind of stuff, the beer is really just a hook, right? It's just a medium to get people together. And so it's not really about the beer, it's about the conversation, it's about the people. Derek making a comment there. Yeah, St. Mark's is a pretty fantastic community, I gotta say. Good people. Very loving, kind, compassionate people and people who are not afraid to try new things and do things differently. And I always say, I have this kind of symbiotic relationship with St. Mark's, where St. Mark's has really been formative of me, because I'm going to say something and you're all going to nod your head when I say it. I am unusual. I'm unusual in the sense that I am a locally raised up priest in an urban setting, and that doesn't happen very often. But those of you who don't know my story here, I started off as the youth minister, which was a lay position really, and did that for 5 years. Then I became ordained and became the associate priest here. And then 5 years ago I became the rector here. So St. Mark's has been very formative of me, even though now I'm in a leadership position where I guess I'm formative of the community. But to me it's a very symbiotic relationship where one forms the other. So I feel very, very blessed to be a part of the faith community at St. Mark's. Great people, open-minded, progressive, involved in the community, and that's been formative of the way that I do ministry. I don't know another way to be to church than what I've experienced here at St. Mark's, right? Jeff Petton, unusual, but that's why you are loved. Yeah, sure, Jeff. Yeah, right. Yeah. Thank you. I think in order to be a priest, you had to be a little weird anyways, right? Priests are like drummers in bands, right? In order to be a drummer, you got to be a little weird. I think in order to be a priest in the church, whether you're a priest or a pastor or minister, whatever language you use, I think you got to be a little bit weird in order to take on this kind of calling. But I'm happy to do it, and so happy to be a part of St. Mark's. And all of this stuff with the pandemic, it's nerve-wracking and anxiety-inducing, and it's a stretch for the church to be able to adapt and to lean into some of these changes. But if any community can do it, it is St. Mark's, and we will be able to adjust to whatever this new normal is going to settle into. Because another thing I keep saying, there's no going back, right? We're never going to go back to just doing everything here in our building. I think this pandemic thing has kind of forced us out into the digital world. Now, we had the benefit, we had a couple of years where we had been experimenting with some of this stuff. So we had kind of a head start on a lot of other parishes and churches. And so that'll serve us well, too, as we move forward. So I've yammered on enough. I'm going to wrap it up here now. Take another sip of my mother's little helper before I end with a prayer. The Lord be with you. Gracious God, we give thanks for your goodness and your grace and your kindness, and for your faithfulness. Your faithfulness to us as individuals, but your faithfulness to your church, to your people. And I pray that you would help us to continue to be faithful to you. And I don't mean faithful in doctrine or in thinking or in theology, but I mean faithful in the way that we live, in the way that we care for each other, in the way that we care for those around us, in particular the most vulnerable, in the way that we care for our neighborhoods and for our communities and for our cities and towns. Help us to follow the example of Jesus, who was always in the thick of things, always in the thick of human suffering and need, always in the midst of questions and concerns and doubts, and never ran away from any human situation, and that even in his resurrection, even in his glorious resurrection, he bears the scars of a broken humanity, a wounded humanity. And that is in those wounds that we are able, through him, to care and love each other, even in our woundedness and even in our brokenness. I pray that that would fill us with hope and compassion and even joy as we face the days ahead, even though they be scary, even though they be challenging. May we see the opportunity that is before us to reimagine who we are as the church, to reimagine who we are as a country and as a society, and to reimagine who we are as people. And we pray this in Christ's name and in the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much for taking some time to be with us today. With this new format, I have no idea how many people are actually watching, so I'm going to glance at my phone before I go. So I'm at 39 or 40 people, so it's good. I know a lot of people will check in after. That's fine. Any comments I would say that you want to put in there about the Gospel of Thomas or how you're coping or anything like that, feel free to post those things in there. And that's it for today. Enjoy your weekend. Explore, discover some churches, some worship from some other parts of our diocese, from some other parts of our province, even our world. This is a great time to be connected via the digital world, so it's a good time to explore. We'll be back for church on April 26th, which would have been our patronal festival, our spring gathering. So that's going to be weird. So we'll have to come up with some creative way that we can engage with each other on that special day. So this is me signing off for today. Take care of yourselves. Take care of the people you love who are the closest to you. Continue to reach out. Continue to be Christ's hands and feet in this very challenging time that we find ourselves. Take care. Love you all.